God is speaking to the serpent, and he says to him, I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. What's the next word? He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. Now, the $64,000 question is, who is he referring to? Now, to what? Okay. Here's the very first mention. He, in other words, a human being, a man. Someone is coming, and he's telling the serpent, and when he arrives on the scene, you're dead meat. He's going to crush your head. By the way, I got to say this. Let's go, the Passion. You saw the movie The Passion, right? How many of you saw it? Do you remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, that first scene when the snake comes out and Jesus goes, you remember that? Right here. Mel Gibson's good, or whoever put that in there, because right here is what it's referring to. He will crush your head. In other words, when this promised one arrives, his mission is going to be to crush your head. In other words, to put an end to your schemes and your history. He'll crush your head. Now look at it. You will strike his heel. That's an interesting statement. In other words, it's going to appear like that God's speaking to the serpent. It's going to appear like that you've hurt him, that you've wounded him, but in reality, you're just going to scratch his heel compared to what he's going to do to you. He's going to crush your head. And again, our mind has to rush forward to the cross, because on the cross, just for a moment, it appeared that evil had won. It appeared that evil had won. But through that scratch on the heel, evil was dealt the lethal blow. Satan's head was crushed. So right here in the garden, that's a mysterious verse, but that he's coming. And when he comes, he's going to crush your head. That's the very first promise of the coming of a Messiah. And what we're going to do as we go through the Old Testament, we're going to trace it all the way up to Christ. We're going to trace it. So, as soon as Adam and Eve sinned, God provided coverings. There's the provision. And then, Genesis 3:15, there's the very first promise. Now, I know none of us understand all about that verse, but do you see what I'm talking about? He. Out of the blue, God mentions this, he's coming, and he's going to crush your head. So rather than God saying to Adam and Eve, you've blown it, guys, I'm sorry. Right there on the spot, God says, let me cover you. And then he looks at the devil and says, you're dead meat for what you've done. You understand? One's coming one day. And then he does something else. You've got to look real carefully to see this. What does God do with the tree of life? Protects. Who said that? Okay. Now, here's the way I look at that. And on the surface, it appears that God's being kind of harsh or punishing them. But let's think about something. At that moment, what was the state of their heart? They had said they had distrusted God. They were spiritually dead. The tree of life represents eternal life. If they would have gotten to the tree of life and would have eaten of that, if they would have lived forever in the state of spiritual death, what would that be? Hell. God did not want them to live or to exist forever in a state of spiritual death, so he guarded the tree of life. He protected them. Let me say it very crudely. He protected them literally from hell, even there in the Garden of Eden. Now, here's the good news. Even though he took the tree of life away there, he gives it back. Where do we see the tree of life given back? Revelation chapter 21 and 22 mentions the tree of life in heaven. But let me mention one more tree. Right in the middle of the Bible, there's another tree. And someone hung on that tree. And that person said, I am the way, I am the truth, and I am life. So, even though it looks like sin has won the day, Not so. God provided coverings. He gave them a promise that the Messiah is coming, and he protected them from further harm or from eternal death. Now notice, chapter 4, what happens in chapter 4? What's center stage there? Cain and Abel. What does Cain do to Abel? Okay, here's the first murder. Okay? So what we find happening is sin